All right, we're going to go ahead and call the March Planning Commission meeting to order. We'll start off by our housekeeping items here. Commissioner Black, if you would take the roll.
Miller. Here. Jack Moore. Here. Black. Here. Monty. Allen. Russellville. Here. Choke. Here. Edel. Here. Thomas. Here. Mr. Kelly. Here.
All right, we do have a quorum. All right, everybody's had an opportunity to look over the minutes from last month. I'll entertain a motion to approve those. What's your pleasure, gentlemen?
Make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I hear a second? Motion, we have a second. All those in favor, acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. All right. No unfinished business. We're going to move on to item number 1. We have a special use permit, install off-premise sign at 46 Bradley Cove Road, submitted by River Valley Signs on behalf of Quick Truck Wash Incorporated. Ms. John Dahl, will you take that away?
Absolutely. Like you said, this is a special use permit over on Bradley Cove Road. They're proposing to do a sign. This is the proposal that they have provided to us for review. Existing conditions, currently vacant. It's the former location of Southwestern Energy, located across from Flying J on Bradley Cove. In this area, you're going to find a few other businesses, including 2 truck washes, a commercial vehicle repair business, Craft Intel and Associates, and waste management. And then just beyond this is city limits line, where you'll have the RV retreat center. Front portion of the property is zoned C2, while the rear portion of the property is C5. Primary distinction between these two zones is that C5 allows 1 additional use, otherwise both share the same building and permitting requirements. The review comments, this is an off-premise non-digital sign which is permitted by special use and could be in line with uses in the district. Special consideration must be given to each application to provide reasonable conditions and protective restrictions to protect the character and integrity of the area. In review of the regulations, Article 7.88 for pylon double post signs is what we would review this against. It's a sign erected and maintained as a freestanding frame, mast, pole, or 2 posts, not attached to any building and not including signs mounted to the ground. So as shown, this is a 2-post sign. Sign dimensions, the maximum square footage is 150 square feet. They're proposing a 20 by 7.4 foot sign, which is 148.32 square feet, so just within the allowable signage for the property for freestanding signs. The maximum height is allowed to be 35 feet, and once you add the dimensions together, it's a total sign height of 15.4 feet, so that's within the regulation as well. They are permitted to have only 1 freestanding sign structure per street frontage. There are 2 open sign frames at the 2 driveways to the property. There do not have any sign facings in them. They're just the frames, and then there are 2 signs attached to the fence at approximately the same location of the proposed sign. Removal of the sign frames and the 2 signs attached to the fence shall be removed, since the proposed sign is utilizing the allowable square footage for the property. So they're using up all the square footage that they can have, and they're only allowed to have 1 freestanding sign on that property. It is the recommendation to approve the special use permit to allow the installation of an off-premise sign with the following condition: to remove existing signage from the property, including both signs attached to the fence and the 2 unused open signs at both driveway locations. This is as a result of the findings that the applicant is utilizing all the square footage for the sign allowance for the property. The applicant demonstrates compliance with the regulations within Article 7.7 and 7.8, and off-premise signs are utilized within this commercial corridor. Are there any questions?
All right, thank you, Sarah. Is there anybody here that, is anybody from River Valley sign here that wants to speak? I mean, we didn't have anybody sign up, but I want to give you the opportunity. Okay? All right. Commissioners? Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve as staff recommended. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. All right. Item number 2, outside service agreement to install a sewer line for a new 7-unit townhouse style development at 1285 East Gunn Street, submitted by Nicholas Hardy. Am I saying that right?
Haggerty.
Huh? Haggerty? Okay. All right. Victoria?
Yes, so this is an outside service agreement located at 1285 East Gum. This is an existing 1.2 acre property where a proposed 7-unit multifamily dwelling has been proposed. Adjacent uses include residential single-family developments, including 2 residential subdivisions to the west and south. The property is not currently zoned as it is outside of city limits. However, it is noted as being suburban single-family on the future land use plan. So several things that we have to review when looking at these outside service agreements. The first are to evaluate the impact on the local community, considering factors such as public health, safety, and the general welfare of residents. Extending the sewer to connect to a residential facility within a residential area would make sense. However, this is more than just a simple connection to a house. It is construction for a multifamily housing development, including 7 units. The project may impact the surrounding community as surrounding uses are typical single-family residential subdivisions. However, in discussions, staff does concur that this land may be suitable to be zoned as R2 medium-density residential in the future, which would allow up to 12 units per acre. This is a higher density than what the applicant is proposing at this time. While higher densities would be allowed, the current development as is would not be allowed technically as proposed, would instead have to be a mixture of duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, or have to be developed as true townhomes on their own lots. The second thing we have to review is to assess the capacity of the existing sewer infrastructure to accommodate additional connections. The City Corporation Board did approve the sewer connection at their board meeting on February 25th of this year, and the city sewer system has sufficient capacity to provide service to the project. The commission should consider including a condition that they extend the line to the upstream side of the property. This would allow upstream properties to connect to the sewer in the future without having to acquire an easement or going through this property after construction is completed. So being that this is within the planning boundary, we do need to consider future growth in this area, and extending that sewer to the upstream side of the property allows for potential future development. Therefore, staff does recommend extending the sewer line to the upstream side of the property unless the applicant can demonstrate that it will already be extended to the highest portion in the area. 3, is the proposal in line with the future land use plan? Technically, no. As stated, in the instance of our future land use plan, it does indicate that this would be suburban single family. Multifamily developments would not be permitted within a single family zone. However, zoning has not been applied to this property in this location, so strict compliance with the zoning regulations would be at the discretion of the Planning Commission as well as the City Council. And as previously stated, staff could see this area realistically being zoned R2, which would allow that higher density development. 4, the application is under the thresholds for large-scale development requirements, so this will be the only review that the city has on this development. And although strict compliance with the Russellville zoning code is not required, they do meet the following requirements within their proposal. They are meeting the parking requirements that the city has at 2 spaces per dwelling units. They've provided 14 parking spaces, and the proposal appears to meet our area requirements. And then finally, although it is not uncommon to extend services, staff believes it is in the best interest of the city to require annexation, as this property is immediately adjacent to city limits. This annexation would have to be completed prior to the sewer extension being made. So, as a result of all of this, staff does recommend forwarding this request to City Council for approval to extend the gravity sewer line with the following conditions. First, extend the sewer to the upstream side of the property, or as stated, the applicant would show us that they're already doing that. 2, obtain gravity sewer extension and associated easements in alignment acceptable to city corporation and property owners where sewer extension is proposed. And then 3rd and finally, annex the property prior to the extension being completed, as the property is immediately adjacent to city limits. This is as a result of the findings that there are no adverse impacts to the sewer system. There is adequate capacity for sewer service treatment. City Corporation approved the application to extend the new sewer line on February 25th of this year. And then finally, this is in line with the Land Subdivision and Development Code, Article 12.5. I know that was a lot of information. Are there any questions for staff?
On this annexation, is this just the 1.2 acres, or is this annexing the next lot above that?
So it would just be this 1.2 acres that's proposed right now. Any other questions?
Thank you, Victoria. You got something you want to add to that, Richard?
I'm Richard Sedian, Fire Marshal. Y'all hadn't seen me in a while. I want to make a statement for the record. And I've dealt with this for a number of years on these properties that lie just outside the city. When they're looking for a sewer, normally when you're looking for a sewer extension and you're dealing with city corporation in the city, you're looking at water and sewer, and they can closer regulate the water side of it. Many times, and I'm not against the sewer extension. I'm not against this at all. I just want to make a statement for the record, and that is one of the things we're faced with, as was mentioned just a little while ago by Victoria, is when you look at annexing, you look at to what standard are those properties built? Are they substandard or not? And when you build a townhome, okay, you saw those lined up, okay? One thing I might say is there's nothing about water or fire protection in here. I can't do anything about that. We've had other issues at other properties in the last few years, but I've seen it over a number of years, so I try to make statements so that everyone knows where I'm coming from. But there's nothing in there about fire protection. The other thing is when you build a townhome, there's no architectural review of the plans. In a townhome, 7 units, okay, according to the state code, you can build a duplex. Any larger than a duplex, triplex on up to apartments, you have to sprinkle them unless you design them by way of a townhouse or a townhome. And what a townhome essentially is a single family unit where the exterior walls are butted together. So you get, in this case, you get 7 single family units, okay? And there is a 2-hour wall that's not penetrated from the decking, from the floor foundation up to the decking. So what's happening is you can build 15 of those together if you want, as long as it's designed as a townhome. And so what the issue that we get into is there's no way to regulate that. So he can put 7, or he can put 8, or he can put 10. He may have an architect, but at the end of the day, the only thing I wanted to say is we have no say-so in fire protection. We have no say-so in the plan review. We don't know if it's truly a townhome by definition, by state code, and we have no way of inspecting it. Potentially, you could get substandard construction, that doesn't have review. Again, pass this on. I may get a chance to also mention this to the city council, as I did with the last project that they did a sewer extension. But I feel like if that's something that I can make a statement about, obviously in the future, if something happens, these kind of things, when you're talking about fire protection and life safety, it's about sleeping well at night. So just want to make that statement, and if you got any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. It's not anything to influence your vote because it's about a sewer extension, but it is a 7-unit townhome.
Thank you, sir.
Sarah, Richard, I appreciate your comments. Question, is this something that we can look at addressing in the planning code itself?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that
Is
question?
this something that we can look at, the situation, that Richard's talking about? We're going to see more of this, it sounds like, in the future. Is this something that we can look at addressing within the code?
The only way we can look at this, based on the zoning code and permitting, is if we actually apply zoning outside of the planning outside of city limits in our planning boundary. And I'm not sure that that is something that we intend to do at this time. The only other way to solve this would be to just annex a whole bunch of property, and I don't know that we want to have that conversation at this time either. Maybe we do, but that's a city council conversation, not a planning commission. So I don't know that there's any way for us to address that besides an outside service agreement, to let him go through this process, request that he annex. It's not a great answer. We just don't have a lot of authority in the planning boundary.
Well, my concern is if that is going to be annexed in, pretty soon, then we're going to accept that building as is. And if it doesn't meet our standards, then we have an issue. And I don't know by law if we can put that in the agreement that it's built by city requirements. and
So I
building
do
code.
believe that the state building code is in effect in the county. Because we just have the minimum requirements of the building code. It's nothing against that. It's just that there's no inspections that occur by our staff to ensure that they do build it to the state building code. But the state building code is in effect within the entire state. So any areas that are not regulated, inspected, they are still anticipated that they're going to build to that standard. It's just not always the case that it is. And I think that's what Richard's concern is that there's no one doing inspections.
Doesn't that meet our 1 mile off the,
It is within our planning boundary, and that is part of why we are here. Because we have to go through this process to give anybody service outside of city limits. But it's adjacent to our city limits, so it's definitely within the 1 mile planning boundary. But because there's not zoning there, we haven't gone through and said this is R1, R2, R3, C1, C2, any of our zoning, we cannot enforce our zoning code regulations.
we haven't had zoning that's been in that 1 mile from city limits, and we still have to inspect it, make sure it's done right. I know in the past, other properties have.
I think I kind of get where your train of thought is. It doesn't meet any of the large-scale development requirements,
Right.
which is typically where we see applications before you all that are in that planning boundary. It is just under those large-scale development. So at 8 units, it would have to come in for large-scale development. They are planning 7 units, so that's why they don't trigger the large-scale development requirements, and that's why they don't have the large-scale development review, building permits, that sort of thing.
Richard, you got anything you want to add to that? Is that?
Does that answer your question, Mr. Jackson?
Yeah, I was kind of confused
Okay.
on the regulations on that, so, okay.
You got anything you want to add to that, Richard?
Yeah, I think to answer your question about code and law, so the state legislature adopts the International Fire Code, Building Code, Residential Code, and they make amendments, and it's called the Arkansas Fire Prevention Code, Volume 1, 2, 3, right? And it is a state law. The problem in the rural areas is you don't have enough people to enforce the code, and you also don't have a permit process. So what happens is if you're building a home or an apartment complex out in a rural area, you might get a state inspector, but you may only have 3 inspectors for the whole state. So that's the issue. And so I'm just, people don't realize this, but since I've been on the building side also, I've gotten calls over the last couple of years from residents that questioned our inspection program out in some outer areas, and they felt like they had bought something substandard. And what they don't understand is I don't have control over that. And, again, if this was a single-family dwelling, there's water shuttles and all that, but when you're doing what they call a townhome, there's a lot that goes into a townhome. So, and again, it doesn't need to influence sewer extension at all. So,
Thank you, Richard.
So I guess I've got a process question. So if the property was within city limits, then it would go through all the inspections and so on and so forth? Yes, sir. Because it is outside city limits, it is not. Correct. In the recommendations for approval, one of the recommendations is voluntarily annexation into the city. Has the project started already? Okay. If we were to require the annexation prior to, we're already going to, in the recommendations, requiring voluntary annexation prior to the extension. If we require voluntary annexation prior to starting work, would it then be in the city and then would fall under that to be able to ensure that the structures that are being built in the city of Russellville aren't? And I'm not saying that you are going to be building something substandard. I'm sure you're going to build something very nice. But to be able to say that we've had our inspectors go out there to make sure that everything is the way it's supposed to be, would that be a way to potentially handle this?
Yes, you could require that the annexation be completed prior to construction, which would then require him to go through the building permit process review. It would require him to go through some drainage review, because then it would fall under all of the city regulations. We were looking at it going, that anything built in the city is just more expensive. And I know he's trying to get this in. So we were trying to be somewhat working with the property owner to allow him to move forward to get this started, and maybe not come into compliance with all of our regulations, because like I said, there would be drainage that he has to consider that he doesn't have to consider right now that he's in the county. He would have to have a building permit and go through all of that review. And then there's multifamily design standards that would be triggered for this, because it is a 7-unit complex. So we're looking at this. When you are extending services outside of a city, you want to ensure that people are coming into the community at some point, and that's why we're recommending the annexation, because this is immediately adjacent to our community. So the idea is that you would bring them in through that annexation, and voluntary annexation is a way simpler process than us having to go through to voter required annexations. And when they're developing, that's the trigger that usually requires annexation. We were just trying to allow a path forward for them to get started, get moving. But if you all decide that you would rather see them annex prior to, and then be required to have the building permits and come into compliance. We can follow that process as well. It would mean that the petition, annexation by petition does go, they file with the county clerk. It goes through like a 15, 30-day review. Then it would come to the city. We would make a determination and present it to Planning Commission on what zone that we would recommend, which you've already heard from Victoria. Most likely, we're going to be looking at an R2 zone in this area, and then that would go to city council. And so it would slow down the process. There's another option if the builder wants to continue going forward and you're going to require the annexation, you could ask him to voluntarily apply for the building permits and go through that process at the same time so that he could get started. We were just trying to find a path forward to allow him to move forward, but still meet the end goal of having additional property annexed into the city.
I'm kind of confused about, this application is to extend the sewer line.
Yes,
It has nothing to do with the building.
correct. It is just to extend the sewer line. It's to give him sewer service for his 7-unit townhouse-style development. It's nothing with the building permit. He just, and
And again, I'm a non-voting member on this body. I was just asking a question just from a process of how to potentially move it forward and also address some of the issues brought up by Mr.
mean-
Sedian.
Would the owner be willing to go through the building code and get a permit? That way you can continue on, and then when it is annexed in, then everything's good to go and it's slowing nobody down. It's kind of meeting everybody halfway, and, and the main thing is life safety, and I love the growth, and I love what you're doing, adding on, but I think there's kind of a way we can meet halfway, and give our citizens the best opportunity and safe living quarters.
Yeah, I understand your concerns.
If you would state your name for the record.
My name's Nick Haggerty,
Okay.
and I'm the owner of this property. So the first concern I want to address is Richard's. I do have a set of stamped plans from Sal, structural, architectural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. And as far as the firewall goes, and it is up to code. And that's how I will be building it. Now, another thing I want to address before I answer you guys' question is the upstream. There are actually 2 manholes that are decently close to this property. The one that I believe Victoria's talking about is a little over 300 feet away at the corner of Huntington Drive.
she wasn't referencing a specific one.
Okay. I think the one that was shown on the presentation, was that the one at the corner of Huntington Drive? Okay, and that is in the right of way, but I'm in the process of getting an easement from a property owner on East Elm Street, I believe, and she's going to get that in the mail maybe tomorrow or early next week and mail it back to me notarized. And that's what the city corp is requiring if I wanted to tie into the manhole down there.
East Elm Street, you said?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. It'll just be on the south side of Gum Street,
Right.
and that is in city limits. As far as getting permits and things like that, I know that as of now, and I've talked to some septic people, some septic installers, and I would be able to fit a duplex, easily a duplex, possibly a triplex on there now, and I wouldn't have to go through this process. But because I'm doing 7, then I can't fit that on a septic system reasonably. So that's why I do want to extend the sewer service out there. But if I was to annex before building, then that's a substantial amount of money that I would have to invest in this property. As far as the civil engineering goes, That's exactly what I'm trying to avoid. I went through this with Pottsville, and that's where I got all these plans from. And they're saying it's going to take too long now. And that's another issue that I may run into with you guys, is I'm wanting to do all this myself. I am experienced. I built 2 houses from the ground up. I know what I'm doing, but I haven't been doing this long enough to get my contractor's license. This project will allow me to get my contractor's license right after I basically finish this. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but I believe that I've responded to most of the concerns.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
I wish more contractors had that view. But I wish more contractors did have that opinion, or that way of doing things, so. But, all right, Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant or our planner? Richard, you got something else you want to add?
Yeah, the only thing I want to add is I appreciate the fact that Nick has stamp plans. And again, it's about the review, right? There's a ton of stuff you look at in a firewalls, not necessarily a firewall, and penetrations, and there's challenges to doing a townhouse. I'm not questioning that the architect did it right. It's just there's a review process. The other thing, the confusion with the sewer extension, Don, has to do with, when it's a city corporation service, city corporation generally marries the two on a project, right? Do you have water? Do you have sewer? But what happens is we have a tendency to give away a Russellville service, a partial Russellville service, and we link these like fire protection. Like, for example, why does city corporation not say, well, if you want my sewer, we need you to extend a 6-inch fire line, at least get a hydrant? But they don't. They just go, you need sewer, and that's nothing against them. But to answer your question, what I've seen a number of times in my career is this sewer line extension into an area that there's no requirement for fire protection, architectural plan review, and inspections. And then when we annex it, we got the sewer, but we got the substandard fire protection. There's nothing I can do about this. But I do. On the Tony Moore project here last year, they did a sewer extension, and I said, massive homes being built out there. Please let them know there's no fire protection. Now, I don't think he probably did that. He's trying to sell homes. But I went to city council, and I put that on the record. You got to be. There's property owners that have no idea about things like fire protection, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, utilities done right. Okay, and so I did want to finish up with that. I appreciate that Nick has a full set of stamp plans, but there's so much more to it than that. So anyway, thanks for your time. I won't delay anymore.
Thank you for your comments.
You bet. Richard Setti, our fire marshal. Appreciate you, bud. All right, Commissioners, what's your pleasure? Do you have any more questions, or?
No, I don't really have a question. I do want to take Richard's comments kind of into thought, and consideration, and just even if it's discussion amongst this group, the Orange Planning Commission, the committee, to maybe see if there's ways that we can address future applications. We will see this more.
Right.
I mean, there's going to be plenty of these projects that are within our planning boundary that we're going to have to make calls like this on in the future.
It'll make annexation a lot easier too.
Yeah, I mean, so not as it pertains to this necessarily, but I think we do need to address it, especially if our fire marshal is publicly telling us that it's an issue.
Right. Agreed.
I'm curious, is the Huntington Cove that's kind of adjacent to that, does it have adequate fire protection?
So Gum Street is the line, I guess, right through there? Okay.
Gum Street, so south of Gum Street is city limits, north is.
Mhm.
Okay. But I'll go to the south of Gum Street, is that? Huntington Place
Is north.
reviewed and approved by the city of Russellville because it didn't meet the subdivision requirements. So it does have our protection. It does have it, so it's adjacent to this property.
Mhm.
And it is active, or it has fire protection. It's close, right? I think so. If it's a subdivision, there are fire protection requirements, in that subdivision, because it kind of falls under, Rocky River large scale, so, we do have some fire protection. Yes, sir. But again, that's single family home. Are you talking about the apartments or the single family home?
The homes,
Yeah.
Huntington Cove right here.
Yeah.
Huntington Cove right to the west of this.
There's about, what, 15 or 20 houses on that little street there, I guess, or not that many, I don't guess, but, yeah. All right.
So as a matter of getting in the weeds a little bit, if we, we're really just approving the sewer line. Does this need to be annexed after your project is completed, or if the city annexes it while it is being constructed and it does not have adequate fire protection, what's the, how does that work?
I think we were talking about meeting in the middle a little bit earlier, and I think a reasonable compromise here would be to let me put up the structure first, because the way the plans are laid out, it's post frame, so it's built like any other barn dominium. You can throw up the whole structure all at once with gravel floor, and then go on the inside and finish that one unit at a time. I wouldn't mind annexing the property before anything is done on the inside. But I would like to build the outside structure before getting permits. Also, to address Nikki's question or concern earlier about drainage, I do have a set of civil engineering plans, but not on this property. David's done this for another property of mine, and it does show the road specs, sidewalk, curb, elevations, not for this property, but this would be what I would be following. And on these plans, it does have a place for a fire hydrant, so I wouldn't mind putting a hydrant out there either.
Worried about the fire hydrant. Because that could be, when it's annexed in, we could build fire protection out there. Mine is the safety of the tenants. Because once it starts in one, if you don't have a firewall, it could go to one end to the other in a matter of minutes. And that's where I'm coming up with the issue I kind of have. And if it's going to be annexed in, then we're fixing to have that property in the city that is not real safe for the tenants. That's kind of where I'm going with it.
Richard, from a review perspective, you mentioned, if, to Mr. Haggerty's kind of point, if he's kind of able to meet halfway, does that allow you or your team to be able to be out there? If it's going to have to be annexed and we're prior to a CO, if it's annexed prior to, you're going to have to issue a CO, correct? I mean, does it allow you an opportunity to get out there and look at it? I'm just trying to understand the process a little bit.
There's a number of ways to look at it. I mean, it's really outside our jurisdiction. So, as a courtesy, Now, there are times that the state fire marshal says, Richard, could you go look at this? Or do a origin and cause investigation on something. I may get a call from a nearby fire chief or something like that. You know, it's, like I said, I mean, there's a number of things that you hope for. Like, for example, if you annex it in and say, well, we'll get fire protection there when you annex it in, well, city corporation is just not, they're not into that. They're not going to say, hey, you annex this, we're going to run you an 8-inch line with hydrants. That's not workable for them in most situations. Now, I'm not saying that there's not some infrastructure build-out plan, but they typically put that on the developer, right? So I don't really know how to answer your question about, I mean, we could do a lot of things. We could, I could take those plans home tonight and take a look at them and tell you whether or not it's truly done like a townhouse unit should be done. We could go out and do inspections. I don't think it's, like I said, it's kind of, that'd be me getting outside my lane a little bit. So this is not the first time this has happened. This is closer to home. We've had some cove landings and some stuff that was years ago out further away. And like I said, that recent one what was that property that Tony Moore, Eagles Crest, that's a ways away. So, maybe I won't be around by then, or maybe I will. But there are, when you start looking close, you just really have to think about that, right? And so, Cody, I don't know if I answered your question or not, man. We can't. We can, but we can't. How about that? We can, but we can't. I mean, I don't know.
The way I look at it is, being it's out of our jurisdiction, we have really no reason to decline it, and I make a motion to move it on to City Council for review and approval. That's my motion.
Okay, we have a motion, gentlemen.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to move this on to City Council. All those in favor, acknowledge by saying aye.
Was that with staff recommendations? I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry, yes, as presented.
Yes.
Yes,
Yep.
sorry.
All right, all those in favor, acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried.
While we're on this topic, I would like to put that in the long-range planning, just for record.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good idea. Okay. All right. Item number 3, we have vacation of right-of-way between lots 12 and 13 of Block 42 of the J.L. Shin Addition located at 215 South Arkansas, submitted by RVI Investments LLC. Victoria, take it away.
Okay, so this is a vacation of right-of-way at the Co-Create Innovation Hub. The existing conditions, this is a commercially developed corridor within the downtown commercial business district. Several businesses and vacant buildings are located within this area. Surrounding uses include appliance retail business and an old service station to the north, and Casey's General Store and the Pope County Library to the south. This property and all surrounding properties are zoned C1, and they are within the downtown commercial district. So when reviewing vacations, there are 3 things we have to consider. The first is, what is the impact of the proposed vacation upon the public trust functions of the right-of-way? Does the vacation impair circulation, access, utilities, open space, and/or views? This proposal is requesting to vacate an unopened alley between the existing business and a home that is owned by RVI Investments as well. 2, utility retention of two utility companies have requested retention of an easement to be able to maintain their utility lines. As staff understands it, there is an existing gas line that runs north to south in the alley and a 10-inch sewer main where future maintenance may be required. Summit Utilities that has a gas line was unable to provide a specific location for the easement that they are needing, so staff is recommending retention of the full 20-foot alley as a utility easement. The second thing we have to consider is what are the land use impacts regarding the vacation of right-of-way. The impact is that the property owner will now be able to utilize the unopened alley between the two properties that they own. As the alley is unused, there is not an impact to the public use. The third and final thing we consider is what is the public benefit received by vacating the right-of-way. There's neither a benefit received nor reduced by vacating this right-of-way, since the right-of-way is unopened and not being utilized by the public, with the exception of the utility lines where we are requesting the easement to be retained. So staff does recommend forwarding this application to City Council for the approval to vacate the 20-foot right-of-way between 215 South Arkansas and 119 East 3rd Street with the following condition: to retain a 20-foot sewer and public utility easement for the existing sewer line and gas lines that run within the alley. This is as a result of the findings that there is not an impact to the public trust, land use, and no adverse effects to the public benefit. No objections were filed by any utility company for the vacation. Summit Utilities is requesting an easement for future maintenance of their utility lines. And then finally, that City Corporation has a sewer main in the area of the vacation and requests retention of an easement. Are there any questions for staff? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Victoria. Any questions, gentlemen?
Motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve as presented by staff. Do I hear a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, acknowledge by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. All right, let's move on to the next agenda item here. We have a large-scale development for Tabor Extrusions to construct a 126,000 square feet addition to the site at 915 South Elmira, submitted by Barrett and Associates on behalf of Tabor Extrusions. Ms. John Dahl, take it away.
Absolutely. Like you said, this is a large-scale development. Tabor Extrusions, they announced in the last year that they were expanding, and so now they're moving forward with that expansion. The existing conditions, the primary structure sits on the property along the railroad tracks at the east side of the property and is located on South Elmira. The property adjacent to the subject property is all M1, with a small portion on the other side of the railroad to the north that is C2. The uses in this area are a mix of some commercial, with all other properties consisting of mostly industrial. Businesses include Americold, Hackney Laddish, Firestone, and ConAgra. Under the review comments, metal molding and extrusion plant or manufacturing uses permitted use within the M1 light industrial zone. Due to the size of the project, it exceeds the exemption clause and is therefore subject to large-scale development review. Site plan review will be required at the time of building permit application. The following items need to be addressed with site plan review. All other items, as noted in the staff report, appear to be in compliance with the regulations. There is currently only one ADA space shown. A total of 5 ADA spaces will need to be provided. Fences are permitted with barbed wire in the M1 zone with a total height of 6 feet. Include the height of the proposed fence at the time of the site plan review. Landscaping is required. Street trees are shown along with the parking lot landscaping. Street frontage buffer may be shown. Exact details will be confirmed with the site plan review. And then a note from engineering was submit civil site plan showing compliance with the grading and drainage permit application. It is our recommendation that you all approve the large-scale development to allow construction of the new 126,000 square foot addition at the Tabor extrusion site with the following conditions. Provide details as noted in the staff report required to confirm compliance for site plan review. Submit the civil site plan showing compliance with the regulations regarding drainage. As a result of the findings that the applicant has expressed their commitment to adhere to the zoning regulations, and the applicant demonstrates compliance with the regulations listed in Section 7 of the Land Subdivision and Development Code. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Sarah on this matter here? If not, what is your pleasure?
Make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a, do what? Dave, you got anything you want to add? Sorry about that. Throw something at me, man, come on.
David Garza with Barrett and Associates representing Tabor Extrusions. We've been working with the design team. Sorry, we meet with them weekly. And Richard has had extensive meetings with them as well. Just looking at the equipment alone that's going in this building is phenomenal. I mean, I don't know how they do it. I mean, they're having to work with all these equipment. The builders, the ones that are putting this stuff together, and then they have to go back and work with the steel to make sure the columns don't get in the way. I mean, it's been a process for them. But this is a huge improvement, a huge expansion, like AmeriCorps was. And so, that just shows they're here for the long term. They're going to add some employees, and they're expanding the parking lot, I think, by 40 spaces or more. And we've been dealing with Sarah, and we're going to put all that stuff in there. I think I already have it on the site plan, the 5 spaces for the ADA and stuff. And we've been working with Glenn as well, and like I said, with all the staff. But, it's going to be huge. It's really good. That's all I've got to say.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Thanks,
good.
Dave, we appreciate you, man.
It's good for Russellville.
Yes, it is, and I like that. We have a motion and a second on the floor here, guys.
Who's our motion, Mr. Chairman?
Who was the motion?
I made a motion.
You did? Who was seconding? Okay. Commissioner Chuck was the second. All right. All right, all those in favor of approval of this large-scale development, acknowledge by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. Okay. All right. I've got a feeling Sarah is going to be talking to us for a minute here. Zone tech amendment to adopt proposed changes to the Russellville zoning code submitted by City of Russellville. Sarah John Dahl, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, we have a few items that we are bringing to you all for your consideration. So the Long Range Planning Committee met for its quarterly meeting on February 10th, and these are the following items that have been forwarded to you for consideration. I am starting slightly out of order because I feel like this is the one that has the most information with it. So we're going to start with accessory dwelling units. In recent years, staff has received an increasing number of inquiries about the feasibility of constructing accessory dwelling units within Russellville. Many other communities have successfully implemented accessory dwelling unit regulations as a way of diversifying housing option, addressing housing shortages, and providing flexible living arrangements. While accessory dwelling units, ADUs, are not a comprehensive solution to housing challenges, they offer an alternate housing type in areas with existing infrastructure, minimizing the need for new public utility extensions. Allowing accessory dwelling units can provide several benefits, including support for multi-generational housing, affordable housing opportunities, efficient land use, and lower construction costs. The proposed regulation update would allow accessory dwelling units while ensuring that they align with the existing character of residential areas and provide a valuable housing option. The regulation will include provisions to ensure compatibility with surrounding properties, including design standards and shared utility connections to the primary structure on the assessed property. So that's all about the accessory dwelling units. We spent a good year on this conversation in committee, did surveys within the community to find out what is amenable to the community for accessory dwelling units, and we're able to finally come to a potential resolution that we are proposing to you all tonight. Do you have any questions about accessory dwelling units before I go on? Okay. So the rest of these are pretty straightforward cleanup changes. Article 1.11, the lot of record, is just correcting a discrepancy between the minimum lot width in the R3 district to match what is allowed in the district. Lot of records actually were required to have a larger lot width than what is allowed in the district, and so we cleaned that up. Article 2.3.1, the general description for R1 single family, just updates to allow ADU is permitted by that ADU allowance in Article 3.1 that's being proposed. Article 2.16, planned unit developments. We've all heard Hudson Harbor. Well, this subdivision taught us a lot, and this is going to correct that kind of the issues that we've had as planning. So the subdivision, that Hudson Harbor was allowed to run as a one-lot PUD, but there's 20-some houses in there, and they're selling off properties, even though it's still one lot, and it's caused a lot of issues. And so this update does correct that to ensure that future PUDs, if it's going to be a subdivision where people can purchase houses, that they do have to go through that long process and create individual lots within the PUD. So that's the 2.16 correction, which is 4 different subsections within 2.16. Article 3.22.5, commercial building design. This is regarding mechanical equipment. This update provides a little bit of flexibility regarding the placement of mechanical equipment on a property. Article 7.8.7 regarding monument signs ensures that any monument sign placed adjacent to a residential property meets setbacks of that adjacent residential property. So if it's an R3 zone and adjacent C2 zone, the C2 zone says that it can place that sign on the property line, whereas an R3 zone has that side yard setback that it would have to be set back. And so that's what this update does, creates a buffer, so that C2 property would have to set its sign back 5 or 15 feet, depending on where it is. Article 8.3, special use permits. This updates to clarify that all notice requirements followed the same notice requirement in Article 10.7. There was a little bit of a discrepancy there, and this creates consistency and ease of use for everyone. Article 10.5 and 10.6 regarding administration and enforcement. These updates formalize the existing practice that the yearly meeting schedule is established by the Planning and Development Department and clarify the acceptable documentation required to verify that notices were sent. The current regulations requires return receipts, which are returned to applicants by the post office, but may not always be received before scheduled meetings, and historically have delayed applications because of a lack of a documentation. State statute does say that we just have to confirm that notices were sent, and so we're updating this to align with the state regulations. That therefore the applicant just has to provide documentation that they did in fact send the notices. And then lastly, Article 12, we are adding a definition for small scale is being added to clarify for consistency what constitutes a small-scale development in relation to the requirements for landscaping. That is everything that I have for you all. Do you have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, we need to vote to approve these changes here, or is this just, are you just informing them? That's, do we,
I do.
okay,
I'm sorry, apparently I'm a little tired. So we are recommending that you forward this application to City Council because the Long Range Planning Committee recommends these additions and updates. The changes align with the intent of the language, and changes are consistent with the objectives outlined in Reimagine Russellville 2040 Comprehensive Plan and the Russellville Zoning Code. Thank you so much. I apologize.
it's all right. Hey. You're good at what you do, Ms. John Dahl. We appreciate you very much. Gentlemen,
If I have to make a motion for approval
okay,
as presented.
all right.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this, these additions to the long range. Move this stuff on to City Council. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. If we don't have anything else, we're adjourned.